Let you know, I'm the Reverend Jason Terhune. I'm actually the priest at St. Mary Magdalene here downtown, over the corner of Elk and Washington. I will not try and proselytize tonight, but if you do not have a church, there we go. My interest in community gardening is this. I am not a particularly good gardener. I am not particularly good at growing organic food or anything like that. But what I do see is very clearly a need, and I'm pretty decent at organizing people and administrating things. So where we are with this project is it is really at the proposal stage. We had been seeking land that was suitable for what we want to do. And when I say we, this is just like a handful of people around town, which has grown into several people around town, where now people are beginning to ask, when are you going to start, what can we do? And I guess the real purpose in it is that I was over at Hands of Mercy. If you're not familiar with Hands of Mercy, it is a facility that has not only canned food, boxed food, but it also has proteins. It has refrigerated and freezered foods for people in the community who qualify for assistance. They have their matrix for that and how they make that work. And what I began noticing was a couple of things. One, there's not fresh produce, and that is something every once in a while there'll be a box there that someone brings by off their farm or something like that. And so I thought, well, this is good food. This is helpful. They're doing what they can, and if you've ever dealt with them, they're a phenomenal ministry, along with Good Samaritan and a number of other places within the community that attempt to assist people with food, but also with utilities and all like this. So anyway, all that to say, what I noticed was that those of us who had what we needed are the ones volunteering at Hands of Mercy, and we are loading and unloading food, we're boxing food, and then there is everyone else who does not work inside the facility that has a need, and they pull up with their vehicles, they come in, they work on qualifying for what they need. And the challenge is that they are down there and we are up here. And it is a constant, we are handing off food, looking down to someone. And that's the way that it works, because it's a warehouse, right? It's not a negative about Hands of Mercy. Hands of Mercy is tremendous in doing what they do for folks. And I love being a part of it. But I asked them, I said, what is it that we can do additional to this to really supplement what you're doing? Because as it's grown, it's gotten more and more supplements for different types of food, and Betty has done an incredible job of getting the food to the right people at the right time. And she said, we really could use some fresh food, some fresh vegetables. And so that got me to thinking, how is it that we can get to where we step off of the dock and get with the people who are actually in need and empower them to do some of this for themselves as far as obtaining the food, because they don't necessarily have a skill set for being employed in the town. They have other backgrounds that keep them from doing so, but they also have disabilities. There's any number of issues that are taking place within Fayetteville. So anyway, the new guy comes into town, blusters into town and says, hey, I've got a great idea what this town ought to do, right? Well, I'm trying to make sure that I don't handle it that way. What I'm attempting to do is empower a group of people that I can help to lead, but this is something that I imagine being sustained much longer than I would be in Fayetteville. I mean, if I'm here my whole life, that's great, but it needs to go on from there. So the idea here is to gather. So gathering people together is already what happens when people have needs. But we're generally across the desk from someone. We're taking an application, right? And that's the proper thing to do. We're having to be good stewards of the things that we have, and people work hard and they give up things so they can give to other people. But when we're gathering together, there is some distance. No matter how well you do it, there is some distance. And I want to try and close that gap. And so what I'm imagining is to grow. That means to do things together. That means that people are in the garden together, and so you might have a person of tremendous means, maybe makes 6 figures a year, drives a nice vehicle, is very secure, can get all that they need from the store, has no issues, next to the person that is making application to simply get by because their WIC program has been shut off, or their SNAP, they no longer qualify for SNAP, something has happened, their account has been hacked. We get all sorts of different situations that people are in about why they can't sustain themselves for that month. And so what I'm imagining is someone who who really just has very little, and you don't really notice the difference between the people that are working. The six-figure person is working with a person who has nothing, and they're bumping shoulders in a garden. So this is where I've started to imagine this. I'm imagining this is where we can do this together. What more simple thing that can you do that is more common than food? Breaking bread together is important, but also getting the food together is also that important thing. So then it becomes gleaning, getting the food out together. And that has a lot of ramifications. One is it supplements what Hands of Mercy, Good Samaritan, and other programs are doing, but it also gives an opportunity for people to put in the hours to actually have something that, as you were talking about a minute ago, Todd, that it becomes a product that you then have an excess of and you can actually sell it. I don't know exactly what that means, again, preliminary stages, but I'm imagining empowering someone to have a basket of food that they either choose to give to their neighbor or they're able to sell it. So, not sure what that means. And then to give it away. That's for the folks who cannot make it to the garden, who don't have the physical capacity, although we're going to make it as accessible as possible. What I'm imagining is to be able to give that away, much like we do through the Hands of Mercy program, much like we do through Good Samaritan, and much like we do through many of the other places in town that do that. So, pun intended, seeking a common ground. You said you weren't intending a pun on the, what was yours?
It was carcasses, the cash cow.
Cash cow, that's what it is. I'm going to remember that one. I'm going to work that into a sermon or something. I'm terrible like that. So if you haven't imagined what a community garden might look like, raised beds are particularly helpful for a lot of different reasons. You don't have to worry about what's under in the soil underneath. It has some definition to it. You don't have to worry about the runoff. We don't get any issues with stormwater with the city this way. And also it makes it more accessible, pathways, it's clearly defined. It becomes, I think, really a simple way of doing that. But then the question comes, what difference would a little bit of gardening make in a city? A 4x4 garden will fully supplement one person's diet. Okay, so I was over at Ashley and Skip's garden, and it looks like, three small gardens feed 3 to 4 families. Is what we were talking about. And looking at some other folks online, that's what their estimates are. A 4x4 garden, that's the size of one of these tables, basically, just a little bit bigger than that, and you could feed yourself for throughout the year. But what becomes really important about this is who actually needs this. And if you take a look, poverty by age and gender, when we look at what's going on in Fayetteville, 32.2% of the population in Fayetteville, estimated at 6,700 people at this time, this is just about 4 or 5 years ago, live below the poverty line. 32% of the people live below the poverty line. I'll let that sink in for a second. While the national average is more like 15%. So the largest demographic living in poverty is females 18 to 24, then followed by females 25 to 34, and then for whatever reason it skips that, I guess it's a time of working, is what I'm assuming. And then you have females 55 to 64. And I can attest to this. The folks that I deal with, that I see all the time that come in that need help, they very easily fit this category. Mothers with 3 and 4 children at the age of 22. Okay? 4 generations of women living together in poverty. They don't have what they need. Now, we can always debate about why they're there and what has happened in their life and all like that. That's not my purpose in the debate. My purpose is to feed them regardless. That's what I'm working toward. And that's what we do through the program that we do at our church. But I really think it's important for us to understand exactly what we're talking about when we talk about who is in need. But it's not just women, it is children, it is men also. So you can imagine that this demographic from 18 to 34 who are the most needy are generally the folks in Fayetteville that are raising young children. That's what I've experienced anyway. So I think that's a fair categorization of what's taking place. Taking a look at this. Now, so where we are now at this point, I was trying to imagine where our garden would be and how it would be the most helpful. And I know a lot of the folks at the First Presbyterian Church, that building, this is kind of weird to do, but right there is the First Presbyterian Church. There is a site that used to have buildings. These buildings have been raised, and so now it is land. There's some areas where it's rock, gravel, and that sort of thing. But just right over here is Hands of Mercy, within sight of this. So this was really important to me to be able to affiliate it in some way with somebody who already has identified a need. And someone said, well, why not do a garden right over at, in Section 8 housing or government-assisted housing? That seems like that would be a really great idea. And I said, that would be a great idea if that's what the folks who live there want, right? What we have identified is the folks at Hands of Mercy have identified that this is a need. And so if we can be in proximity, it becomes a functional way of helping people. And we're not having to go out and explore to find out who needs this. It's identified. A group that is already feeding 2,200 families per year, which is a significant portion of that number that we talked about earlier that's living in poverty. And I promise you there is a large number beyond that lives paycheck to paycheck. Mm-hmm. Just because someone's not in poverty does not mean that they don't live paycheck to paycheck. And we deal with them as well. So again, being in proximity of an identified need, rather than identifying the need for someone else and telling them where we're going to put it, is to put it in proximity of where the need is. And so we just basically found out about this land. It has become available to us in this last month. So that's why I've been waiting until we can figure out where it's going to be. It's really hard to promote something that you can't say where it's going to be. People like to see stuff, right? You said they come out, Todd said that you come out and you can identify with the stuff that you're buying because you can actually see where it's done. So at the street level, it's very it's not going to be very invasive. You've already got a lot of gravel right along here along the edge of the road where we'll have parking. The best part of the ground is up here to the left-hand side, and it's actually further south. Imagine that. Things get better the further you go south, right? So the further you go south on this property, the better things get. There's shade up in here where people can actually sit and meet and prepare for the rest of their work out there. So there we are. I do have more information that will lay out sort of what we're looking for, but I want to give you an overall picture of what we hope to do. But if you're interested in it, know someone who'd be interested, I have basically a little full four-page pamphlet that will spell some of this out, and it talks about preliminarily. There's a little insert here that will tell you what it is that we have to do to make this go. There's a lot more that has to be done than just this, but this is kind of a getting started, I would say. And so these are just a visual of what it would be like, perhaps, to have raised beds out here on this empty property. So you can see adding some trees, some beautification, simple and plain boxes that are just nice, and the grounds are kept pretty decently. It takes volunteer hours, but this is not beyond the scope of having a few dozen volunteers that are involved and people that want to actually have the produce. Just a quick example of a type of way of doing this. You can see it's very simply put together. It's pretty straightforward to have a raised garden. You can basically do this at your home. So again, more examples of where this is going on. And there are thousands of these across the nation. These are all over in different cities. My first inspiration for it was a gentleman up in Milwaukee, and he realized that there was a need for kids who were getting into gangs. If they had some other opportunity to get involved in something besides a gang, he felt like they would do it. So he started a garden, and that has blossomed into the point that many, many other people are doing the same thing and are using his model and various other models where things have been improved and all like that. I learned that you start out, and I told you I'm not any good at this, right? But I can help lead it, and I'll get out there, and I'm really good at labor. You said I'm a big, strong guy. I can get out there and do the labor like that. I'm pretty good like that. This is where it starts. You build a box, you put cardboard in it, you get rid of the grass, and you start growing things on top of that. You get some of that handy, great soil out of Franklin that's going to become Fayetteville soil eventually, right? So there we are. So what are our neighbors doing? Nashville Food Project is one example. Your compost has helped our gardens thrive by adding mulch, much needed organic matter, and on it goes. We use your compost in all of our beds. These are the type of places where that soil is going, and these are gardens that are feeding other people, okay? This is what we're talking about doing. We're talking about getting involved in people's lives in a way that they have asked for, not invading their lives, telling them what they need, but being available for them to provide what it is they need. These things can get pretty creative, right? Look at that. Now tell me that wouldn't be beautiful for the city, right? Maybe it's not going to start out like that, but as you were talking about envisioning bigger and better, imagine this could be something that's actually very appealing to people that you work into the city's, just how art looks good, you improve that. Again, another idea. You see, that's a cathedral style. It's in the form of a cruciform. So if you get much money from us, we're going to ask for something like that. So we want it to look like that. The little cross out in the middle. Another example, what this does too is this offers an opportunity where refugees are always in the news, right? And it's a really big deal. People that are coming to this country, and there are a lot of statistics that I can talk about as far as how our church is involved with refugees and the percentage of refugees that within 18 months have repaid their immigration into this country, but have also are self-sustained. It's in the 90 percentile. They're better than people that are coming in as refugees that come through our program are actually more successful than folks who are born in the U.S. and come through our high school program. They have a higher rate of success than our high school graduates on average. And I don't mean that demeaning in any way. I'm just saying there are great opportunities for our refugees. And one really terrific example is a movie called All Saints. All Saints is based on a church out of Smyrna. The church in Smyrna is an Episcopal church, and I am giving a little plug here, but that's okay. Our diocese supported the Myanmar refugees, the Karen people, to come in. They came and found the church. The church was beginning to close. The Karen people needed a place to grow their food. They had a piece of land with the church that was mortgaged. The Karen people began farming and paid the mortgage and got all the food that they need. These are not them in particular. I couldn't find a really good picture of them, but this is a very similar situation to what you'll see in the movie. And the Karen people now provide organic food materials that are unique because they brought their own seeds over, and they now supply restaurants all throughout Nashville that pay big bucks for their food. And I don't think they're doing raised gardens, but this is an example of some Myanmar people who are doing that in another city that has actually grown into other cities. Okay? And I know I'm talking fast, but there's a few plugs that I want to get in for this. The garden this garden right here would provide for a family of 3 or 4. I'm sorry for the typo, correct my spelling, which was wrong. But that's an example of what could end up coming out of this, is that you have people in their own yards actually able to provide their own food, working with a neighbor. I don't know if y'all know it, there's a vineyard over right behind Fayetteville High School. If you're ever driving through on, is it William Bagley Drive, I think it is, I don't know the area too well. If you drive through there's a pretty decent size, like a 1-acre vineyard over there. You should check that out. There's some things going on that we don't quite realize. That's an example of that type of thing. I think it's a beanstalk. But you can see it's not obtrusive, it's not unsightly, it's just pleasant, it's pretty, it's what people are working on. And then another thing is that this can actually be done for handicap accessibility. That's another big part of the raised beds, is that it's actually accessible for most anybody. Obviously there's certain limitations. This gentleman would need help getting the soil into the actual boxes and all like that, but there's a substantial part that he can be a part of, right? This opens that up a lot. So inspiration, again, this is what you'll see in people's backyards. Once this starts happening, you'll find this in between buildings downtown where people take overgrown grass and chop it down and put up a few gardens, right? This is what happens when that happens. So answer the challenge, that's what I'm asking. If you cannot feed 100 people, just feed one. That's Mother Teresa's, one of her just really famous lines is, feed somebody. And the G4 Project is a project that is meant to foster a one-on-one atmosphere. Again, remember, this is about bumping into each other and sharing tools among all socioeconomic strata. And all the rest of this is in here. I would encourage you to get one of these and take a look at it. I brought about 10 of them. If you're interested, you can certainly contact me at the Episcopal Church. I'm easy to find on Facebook at the church. I'll happily give my cell phone number. I give it out specifically because I get a lot of random weird phone calls, but I'll give it out to someone directly to you if you would like to find out more about this. So there we are. We're at the beginning stages. If you're interested, it would be really helpful to have you jump on board. So thank y'all.
Thank you, Jason.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wonderful.